Hey everyone, what's up? I'm back today with another impressions video. And today I'm going to be talking about this game right here. This is Great Battle Full Blast on the PSP. And as you can see by the cover here, this is a Kanpachi Heroes game. It's a compatible Heroes game starring, Gundam, Kamen Rider, and Ultraman. So, Great Battle. Let's talk about Great Battle for a little bit. Great Battle is actually a pretty big series. I think that might be the fifth or sixth game in the series. I don't know without checking off the top of my head. I'm not sure, but there's a bunch on the Super Famicom. Great Battle. I think maybe all of them, 1, 2, 3, and 4, might be on the Super Famicom, but I think it's possible one is on the Famicom. Again, I'd have to check. I honestly don't remember, but what kind of game is this actually? You're thinking, the last game I talked about that was a crossover game like this was Lost Heroes, and that was a first-person dungeon crawler. This game is nuts. It's a what is the best way to explain this? It's kind of a platforming beat 'em up. It's got a lot of beat 'em up elements, but it's not quite as beat 'em up like as the Kamen Rider game I reviewed last time, which was all Kamen Rider Generations 2. And that's a straight up beat 'em up. There's levels to the stage, you can move up and down, and it's just lots of fighting. You come to bosses and you fight. This game is a little bit different than that. You There are a lot more platforming sections. You are kind of scrolling left to right or right to left depending on the stage, and you're jumping over pits and avoiding obstacles and fighting enemies. And the fighting of the enemies is done like a beat 'em up. So you will fight the enemies, except there is a kind of rock paper scissors element to it. So you have in the stages you can switch between the type of character you're using. So you have one Gundam, one Kamen Rider, and one Ultraman with you, and you can switch between them at will. So there's enemy types that are specific to those types. So you'll have kind of monsters for Ultraman, and that's the standard Ultraman monster. And then you have the Shocker troops, which are Kamen Rider troops, and then you have kind of enemy Gundams for Gundam. And what happens is the matchup is like it's normal for those. So if a Kamen Rider fights a Shocker, the damage is normal. However, there are certain enemies or certain hero types that have a advantage or disadvantage against certain other types of enemies. So, for example, if you're Ultraman and you fight Shocker troops, you do double damage, which is like a kind of the Shocker troops are weak against Ultraman. But if you're fighting Gundams as Ultraman, you do half damage. Um, and each character is set up that way. So, Kamen Rider fights Gundams, he does twice damage. If he fights monsters or kaiju, I guess, he does half damage. And the same with Gundams. If they fight kaiju, they do double damage, and if they fight Shocker troops, they do half damage. So it's a pretty interesting situation because it's a platforming beat 'em up, but it does have this kind of thing where you have to switch between enemies to fight uh, quickly and efficiently, I guess. And of course, you'll have to fight the bosses using this switching a lot. So what'll happen is like a lot of times you'll get in the stages and they'll be all Shocker troops, and you're just like, okay, I'll just use my Ultraman, and then suddenly they'll start switching it up on you. Like they'll throw out two Shocker troops and then one Gundam or something, and it's like you'll have to take out the Shocker troops and then switch over to your Kamen Rider to fight the Gundam that's in the mix, and it does kind of get frantic at sometimes. They'll throw one of each type or two really strong enemies of some type that are of opposite types, so you can't fight them with the same characters. So it does add a little bit of, I don't know, fun to the game when you're playing it. And there are other kind of side stages where you have a choice between which character do you want to use and which path do you want to take. And the path will be, either choosing a Gundam, an Ultraman, or a Kamen Rider. And they all have their own special types of stages. So if you choose an Ultraman at this point, you'll be able to go to a kind of boss arena where you'll have to fight a boss, like a giant monster of some kind. Or if you pick a Gundam, you'll have to go through a kind of short, like a puzzle stage almost. And if you fight Kamen Rider, there's motorcycle stages. So You can imagine they're somewhat uh, like a like the kind of jet cycle areas in Battletoads. Not that difficult though, but the setup is kind of similar. You have obstacles you have to avoid, and you have enemies and missiles and things you have to avoid and or attack. It's pretty standard kind of side-scrolling motorcycle type stuff that you'd expect, but it's interesting because it does throw in a few interesting kind of mechanics to it. So there's jumping and stuff with the bikes on ramps and kind of attacking enemies in a certain pattern with the motorcycles. It's interesting. Those motorcycle parts actually were the most difficult parts of the game for me. I had a rough time with them at some points. It was like the only part of the game where I felt like I had to restart like a stage. So let's talk about the difficulty. It's not incredibly difficult. Um, there are parts in the stages where you might get caught or in something where there's stages where like you can kind of keep getting knocked back into pits, and there's a certain boss towards the end of the game where like you have to jump on a bunch of moving platforms that disappear when you fight, so you find yourself falling a lot, and you take damage when you're falling, so it's a little, it takes a little bit of strategy, and sometimes it takes a little bit of luck on that one, unless you have a really good kind of strategy going on, which is, I think like it adds a nice bit of challenge. But overall, it's not incredibly challenging. The game itself took about 4.5 hours maybe to beat. And you might be thinking, well, 4.5 hours, that's not a really long game. Well, it's not. I mean, it's not incredibly long, but you can't, it does have some replayability because you can't access all the paths. Like, you can't, if you select, when you're going through the stages, if you select Kamen Rider, you can't do the two other stages that are set for Ultraman or Gundam. So you do have the option to play through again and go those extra routes to get the different stages. And the story, there is a story about collecting crystals and merging three worlds, or not merging three worlds in your case, but it's pretty interesting in a kind of tokusatsu kind of way. It's not like a really deep or kind of interesting story, but it's interesting in the way that it's genuinely a tokusatsu story. So like if you're into that kind of thing, I think you'd probably enjoy it. But well, that's pretty much all I wanted to say about Great Battle Full Blast. It's not that expensive right now. If you wanted to buy just that game, it's $15 maybe on Amazon. It's cheap. And the benefit to that is that I have this Great Battle Full Blast, and you can see this is the twin battle box. This is a special edition. And why did I get the special edition, you're asking? Well, it wasn't that expensive, but also it includes one of probably the rarest PSP games in Japan, well, physical releases at least, which I'll talk about in my next impressions video, and that is Battle Dodgeball 3. So we'll talk about Battle Dodgeball in the next impressions video, which will be the second half of this. So, Great Battle Full Blast for the PSP. Check it out if it sounds interesting to you. It's cheap. It was cheap, and I'm kind of interested in these compatible Heroes games recently, so I picked it up. It's not something like I would recommend if you're, really not interested in any of this stuff, any of the like Kamen Rider or Ultraman or Gundam type things. But if you are interested in all of those, these games are fun, and they're real like fan service for everyone. So until then, till I get around to recording Battle Dodgeball 3, I'll see you guys next time.